Hey guys, Reed here. I just wanted to hop on before today's episode of the podcast to do a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you so much for checking out the very first episode of our Best Made Weddings podcast. This is a spinoff of our almost 3-year-old Get to Know Your Wedding Pro podcast. That podcast featured lots of long form, in-depth interviews with wedding professionals all over the Pacific Northwest. And I thought this was a great logical next step to continue to hear from a lot of those voices and use their expertise to answer questions from you guys, the audience. One favor I have to ask as we start this new podcast adventure is to please like and subscribe to the podcast. If you go to www.bestmadevideos.com/subscribe, I have a nice, easy webpage set up with links for both the Get to Know Your Wedding Pro podcast, as well as the Best Made Weddings podcast. So whether you're an Apple Podcast user or Spotify or SoundCloud, I try to set up some nice, easy links on there that'll get you started. And I just want to thank you guys so much for all your support over the last 2 going on 3 years of podcasting. I think this is going to be a really fun and hopefully educational new endeavor into the world of wedding planning. Thanks again and enjoy. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I was joking with Dorothy before. I feel like the most popular kid in school that I asked all of my favorite people to come on and everyone said yes. And so it means a lot to start this podcast and really, bring a lot more education. I think it's incredibly valuable to get to know vendors, in long form interviews and talking about themselves. But also, I think as this is an example today, there's so much knowledge with everybody here and just kind of incredible, right? The resources we have. So to be able to share that, we have a lot of good questions today, which I'm really excited about to tackle too, which is kind of everything going on, with a lot of reschedules and, the pandemic and everything. But I think that a lot of this information is still going to be relevant, lots of things, lots of different examples going on, for years to come. So thank you guys so much for coming on. Let's just go around real quick first off and have everyone introduce themselves. Maybe we can go alphabetical order since that's how I put the episode cover together. So BreeAnn, we can start with you.
Okay, I'm BreeAnn, owner of Pink Blossom Events, and also chapter president for WIPA Seattle. And I've had my business, or actually this November, celebrating 14 years in business. So in addition to weddings, I specialize in corporate celebrations and milestone birthdays.
And Jen?
My name's Jen. I'm the owner of Jen Leslie Events. We specialize in planning, design, and we also do florals. I've had my business for 6 years now, and super excited to be here today. Thank you.
Lori?
Hi, I'm Losee. I'm the owner of Elegant Affairs. We're based in the South Sound out of Lakewood. This coming August, we'll be in business for 15 years. Primarily, we do wedding planning and design.
And Rebecca?
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Grant. I'm the owner of New Creation Wedding Design and Coordination, based out of Snohomish and East Side area. I specialize in Asian and Pacific Islander weddings, and I'm also director of membership for WIPA.
This is great. I mean, and just the the knowledge that we have. I'm so excited to really tackle some of this stuff today. First off, I think we should just go kind of around the horn and check in, see how everyone's doing, kind of with everything. Goods and bads. We just booked another wedding today. Obviously, people are still postponing. So why don't we go reverse around and Rebecca, start with you. Just kind of check in and how is everything going so far?
Why do you start with me? In honesty, it's been a very exhausting time. I mean, I've been a planner for 16 years in total, and I can never remember in recent memory anything that has been this emotionally draining for both our couples as well as us as wedding professionals on a large scale basis. So it's definitely been challenging. I also own my wedding venue, so that adds an extra layer of complexity to getting hit 2/3 income wise and 2/3 couple wise into getting a lot of reschedules done and a lot of keeping couples happy. I will say within the past, honestly, about 2-3 weeks, we've noticed a very significant uptick with both planning and venue side, starting to get more inquiries coming through. So I think people are realizing that life can't be put on hold. We still need to move forward and look forward to celebrations and have those moments just to be able to see light at the end of the tunnel and be able to celebrate couples and being able to get married.
And Lori, how are you doing?
I'm playing the roles of mom, business owner, and school teacher. We've got less than 3 weeks left of school, so to have a 9th grader and a 7th grader, at least they're old enough that they can do schooling on their own. But it's been really challenging being away from the team, being away from my office, working from home all the time. And I feel like, and I don't know with the other ladies, I feel like I'm working literally 24/7 just because we're trying to catch up with the ever changing news and staying abreast of that with our couples and saying, hey, this is what's going on. So I just feel like I'm just kind of constantly playing catch up with every single, vendor and venue and our couples and just making sure everybody has the right information moving forward, if that's rescheduling, keeping as scheduled, or knowing what all the options are. So it's just kind of a carousel of just moving pieces. And, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're getting there. And I'm ready to get back to weddings. I miss it. I feel like a part of me is not here just because we've had one wedding right before the shelter in order place went into effect in March. And it's weird. By this time we would have had a bunch of weddings. And so it's, and then each passing weekend when we should have had this wedding, it's kind of a bummer, but knowing that for the rescheduled date, it's going to be even better. And there's going to be a lot of love going on.
Jen, what about you?
I would echo what Lori and Rebecca said for sure. It's been a mix of emotions, a mix of feelings. I think I'm kind of at the acceptance phase of, okay, I've got a lot of free time this summer. What am I going to do with it? Has been my recent thought, as well as just trying to, and I know we're going to talk about this more later, but just trying to kind of prepare myself for what does the fall look like? What do we need to be thinking about? And then we're already, jumping into next year and helping couples with that. So, I have days where I'm still really bummed. Like I was supposed to be in Sun Valley this week for a wedding this weekend that I was really looking forward to. And, it's tough. It's tough. We empathize with our couples for sure and just what they're going through. But just taking it day by day.
And BreeAnn?
I would say this time it's been hard working with our couples, but I think throughout this, I've learned that I still really love my job, which is as crazy as it's been. And I think as a planner, we've been pulled in all directions from, our clients helping, which I feel grateful we can. And a majority of them have been the most appreciative of our services. But I also think, we've been pulled in the direction of vendors asking to pick our brain and know what's happening. So that's been exhausting. But we also know everything that's happening in every aspect of the industry, which is, I think, helpful. And it's just nice to be insightful. But I still think after all this, this is what I meant to be doing. So I think that's been just clarifying as well.
Yeah, it's so tough. I mean, definitely for all you guys to have to stay up on it. I mean, even just when I was logging on today, Como had posted something about, is King County now in the 1.5 or whatever? And immediately people are asking, I think the planner is like, okay, so what's going on, right? Because you guys are kind of just that go-to collective. And I think that it's so tough. And I think, BreeAnn, I think we were on one of the WIPA calls or that you were on and I was watching, and it was talking about, planners really being hurt the most because a lot of the weddings that we are postponing or rescheduling at this point, you guys were at the finish line of we got a couple weeks to go. And now, for me, okay, we'll move that date to next year. Okay, that's fine. But for you guys, it almost resets that clock again.
Oh yeah, we were at the peak. We were already there. They were ready to get RSVPs and go down the aisle. I mean, we've done majority of the work.
Yeah. So it's just, it's just hard, right? Where you guys, it's just setting it back to zero again and doing it. So.
Well, especially for couples that are potentially changing seasons too when they move to next year. So that's something that you're completely changing design boards and just changing everything up. They could be going from a June wedding to now March or April. So there's whole different changes with that too, which has been challenging.
Yeah, but I also think too, that's a great point, Lori, is talking with clients because they do have the bridesmaid dresses, the groomsmen attire. So you don't want to change too much. So it's how do we change what we have, just adapt a little bit. So what do you have planned for this summer and how do you make it spring looking? Because we don't want to start all over again. So that's what I'm telling people, because I know our couples are just as exhausted and they don't want to start from scratch. So I'm very much saying, okay, this is what we have. Let's just make a few tweaks and not have to worry about, starting from zero.
How do you guys feel, the couples, and we'll get into postponing and everything, but the couples that you guys still have booked, and like I know Rebecca, we just signed on one for the end of August. How are people feeling now? Are they feeling worried still, or are the ones that we still have going, are they still, and who wants to tackle that first?
I'll jump on since we just booked that end of August one. Yes, I mean, absolutely. There is definitely nervousness amongst the remaining couples from this year. And I've even gotten a couple couples that are in 2021 that are saying, well, what is this going to look like? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even wrap my head around this year. Like, you're not even on my radar right now. Like, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. But yes, I mean, I just had two of my largest events that both were supposed to be in October rescheduled to next October. And so it's, so far the majority of August on has hung in there. These two in particular were just biggest guest counts, biggest dollar amounts, most people coming in from out of state that just got really nervous. And so they decided to both pull the trigger and postpone to next year. So that does, of course, come with a little bit more of a financial hit for couples that are getting just kind of that nervousness because it is a voluntary reschedule. And so having that peace of mind of moving into next year and just feeling a little bit more safe with guest counts and plans in place. There are some vendors, of course, that do have a reschedule fee. Obviously, that's a longer time that I'm working with them. We're now into a 2-year engagement instead of a 1-year engagement. So there's a lot of logistics that go along with that. But yes, for the rest of the year, there is definitely a lot of nervousness for sure.
Well, I think go ahead, Jen.
And I was just going to say, I'm sure the other planners have this situation as well, but we have a couple that was supposed to get married this Saturday, early June. They've postponed to late September, but are now getting concerned about late September. And so it's then walking through the process again and trying to kind of, like Rebecca mentioned, work through the different fees with the different venues and kind of what they're doing. And just trying to reassure them that, yes, you did make the right call at the time and you're just working with the information that you have. But I know it's really heartbreaking for them and just frustrating to have to go through the whole situation again.
Well, and that's exactly what we're doing too, is that we had a couple that were supposed to get married May 3rd, rescheduled to August 9th. And now we're talking tonight and saying, what are all our options? And for me, being down in here in Pierce County, cross our fingers, hopefully we're going to be moving into phase 2 this week. But that all changes between us, King County, and Snohomish County, which are 3 big counties that we're doing things in. So it's knowing the information from all the counties and saying, okay, well, in Pierce County, we know we should, and that's the hard thing is putting in quotations, we should be in this phase by this point. And King County, it's kind of one of those, will they move into, 1.5? Are they going to move into 2? So it's hard when you have, different couples in different areas. We still have a July couple that is pretty gung-ho holding their wedding, and they're, adaptable to move to, under 50 people if we get into phase 3 by the end of July. So it's just a lot of, couples that want to be over prepared and couples are like, we're going to go forward and we'll just have to adapt. If we have to elope, we'll elope and then we'll have a party later.
Yeah, it's hard. We had one of Dorothy's good friends was going to get married in October, and she, they have, they're like our age. They have a lot of like elderly, her mom and dad are older, and so, they have already postponed. And when she had talked with me, and I was like, Natalie, I have weddings that have rescheduled to, like the Friday, like they were going to be October 3rd. I said, my May whatever already moved to October 2nd, and now you're already worried. I mean, are you guys worried about that domino effect? And we have a lot of questions from the audience. I was actually really surprised, pleasantly happy to get some. We had this question from Faith, and she said, what are the pros and cons of postponing versus attempting this fall wedding? I'm pretty set on mine happening in September, but I don't quite know what that will look like. Do I tactfully uninvite people to reduce guest count? I mean, what are you guys, and maybe we could start with BreeAnn and work back around. What are you guys advising, for fall weddings now?
I think right now it's just being realistic and setting where we don't have answers. I know Rebecca and I specifically are on an association that's, has direct contacts with people working with the government and, trying to get answers, and we don't have those yet. So being honest with our clients, but also giving them options, because not everyone is in a position that wants to postpone or reschedule. And so if they do want to choose to have the wedding, which I think, that's great, but it's knowing that you might have to be flexible and incorporate different safety measures for this year, or reduce your guest count. But I think the whole, and also reevaluating the reason behind the wedding. Is it, just because you guys want to get married and it's the love, and you can have an intimate group and still be as happy? Because we've all of us on here have done intimate weddings that have probably been some of the most meaningful to this day.
Oh, yeah.
So you can have that fabulous event. But if it is something where all of your guests are traveling out of town and you want that big party, then that's when you might consider, postponing. But I don't think you have to.
Jen, what do you think?
Exactly. BreeAnn nailed it. We've been asking our couples that question of what is the most important thing to you? Is it getting married, or is it the big celebration and party? And there's definite benefits to both, for sure. I can relate to that. So our couples have then kind of chosen to go one way or the other, depending on how they want to answer that. Everyone's financial situation is also very different. I think where family and friends are traveling to and from plays a factor into this. Seattle's a great place to live, or the greater Seattle area. And I think a lot of our couples have only lived here for maybe a couple of years. So everybody was going to be coming to Seattle as a destination to begin with. So that's things to kind of consider. And it's still really personal decision. So I think just walking them through, here are your options one way or another, and helping them just look at whatever facts we have at hand, and then giving them time and space to make that big decision.
Lori, what do you think?
No, I totally agree with Jen. I think too, it is presenting your couples with all the information so they feel like they're empowered to make the decision. The last thing we want is the couples to be forced to say, well, we're kind of already beyond that point where you're going to have to, you can't hold your wedding. So we want to make them feel like they are making that decision rather the decisions being made for them. When we had our wedding in March, we went from, in a 10-day span, when all this came about, we went from 171 guest count to 41 so that we can include vendors. And that was important for the couples, that we were at the finish line, and, they didn't have a lot of people coming in from out of state, a lot of people coming in from Eastern Washington. And so they decided to live stream their wedding on YouTube. And it worked out. And, she kept saying is like, I feel like I'm going to miss the whole, big wedding. And at the end of the day, she's like, I loved having the small, intimate wedding. It was the most amazing thing. And plus two, she goes, we went from 21 tables down to 6 tables, and all of her centerpieces were just lavish. And she's like, I couldn't have got this regardless. So it worked out in that way. But again, it's making the couples feel like they have the power of, making the decision for them. And we're also in a time too, guests are being understanding with that particular wedding, uninviting a lot of people, they were okay with it. I think at a different time, if you're, having to cut for, budgetary reasons, people are like, well, why am I getting the cut of the list? But now people are totally understanding, or giving that option. Like, do you feel comfortable coming to our wedding? And that's the other thing is we've been telling our couples is that, your wedding could look a lot differently, even going into October and November. People are, could still be wearing masks at that point. And, what is that going to look like? And do you feel comfortable? And do your guests feel comfortable?
Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah, so we're offering the same thing. We're just really having those conversations with couples kind of coming up on the cusp of possibly being affected. What is the priority to you? Is the priority getting that, getting married and having that done and just the celebration of starting your new life together? Or is the priority the big party? One of the things that I have been informing my couples that, okay, if the big party is the priority to you, we still don't know what weddings are going to look like even into 2021. So we're banking on the fact that, okay, hopefully all this will be behind us come, into 2021, but we don't know. So I want people to be realistic in the fact that even though we're postponing to try and have kind of what your wedding would have been in 2019, we don't know if it's going to look that way in 2021. So I think it's also just kind of being that reality check of like, we want to support you in whatever direction you want to go, but just know we don't know what that landscape is going to look like. On the flip side of that, I have had couples that the wedding is totally their priority and they have downsized their guest list in order to accommodate, ideally moving into phase 3 where we can have up to 50 people. And that has been out quite well. As Lori mentioned, like families completely understand. Mm-hmm. And if they want to have a big party later on, so be it. But at least like they know the phase of life that they're in right now and kind of view that we're in and just needing to understand that it's going to look a little bit different right now. And families get it. I've had several couples move to midweek, which I'm really thankful of as a vendor, because of course that frees up the ability to book the weekend. But guests they totally understand. Like they're like, we're totally going to make this work no matter what. And that's been really like refreshing to see that couples are, your wedding day is affected anyway. So move it to midweek. Like you can keep your entire vendor team intact. You can have cheaper rates a lot of the time. So like, why not, and from a personal standpoint, for those of you that know me personally, I've been married twice. My first wedding was way back in 2000. And it was huge and it was impersonal and I didn't get to see everybody that I even was there in attendance. And when I had the opportunity to get married a second time back in 2010, it was my wedding and it was the people that were the core of what was important to us. And we had 80 people and it was great and it was lovely and everything that we wanted it to be decor wise and family wise and feeling wise. So those are kind of my experiences as we've crossed this bridge.
Related to that with the downsizing, I know that obviously you guys have said, families are really understanding and friends. Does anyone have any other advice on that? That was a question that came up a lot, was just generally, how to handle that. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that we haven't touched on?
Well, I think, as was mentioned before, people are going to be relieved if they don't have to come, a few people. So I think like Lori said, when you're asking if you're comfortable, like if there are, I think at this day, it doesn't hurt to ask, or you're going to hear through the grapevine, like this family's not comfortable to travel because they're overseas or they have somebody who doesn't have the best health conditions to be in attendance. But I also think a nice note card, or even most of my couples have even chosen just a personal phone call to let them know that their guest count has changed because they want it to be personal. So I think just that personal touch to say, look, this is where we're at. We've had to reduce to only close or even just immediate family in some families. And so people are understanding. And I think as long as you make that personal connection, I don't think there's going to be hard feelings right now.
Yeah, and I do know a lot of stationers have come up with specific templates or phrases, sayings to be able to help couples through what they're going to send out to their guests. So I do think it does need to be, if you can, a little bit more of a personal approach, like what BreeAnn with having that direct phone call, but then follow up with something in the mail, in writing, and yeah, a lot of local Seattle stationers are willing to help with that.
Well, I think go ahead, Jen, sorry.
Clear communication is most important. So make sure once you have made that decision that you're being really thorough in your communication, you're updating your wedding website. Maybe you're doing a phone tree if you can't get to everybody right away and you're kind of under a time crunch, sending emails as well. It would not hurt to do all three of those options just to make sure that people know what the plan is and they feel considered and thought of through this difficult time.
Yeah. And I was just going to add, I think, we tell all of our couples to make sure they have a wedding website. And obviously we've had a lot of couples reach out to us and say, how do we handle, friends and family and guests, like constantly calling, texting, saying, are you going to cancel your wedding? What's on? And, that stresses them out. So, we just put a little blurb on your website and just say, hey, this is where we're at. And I think too is, people all just want to be part of, the knowledge base. And I think, if any guests are listening, be respectful of the couples just because they're already so stressed out about this. The last thing they need to have is just been to be bombarded with questions or like, I really feel like you should cancel. And we've had couples that have had family and friends say, we really think that this is the next step. And then they're like, well, should we do that? Should we not do that? So it's just, communicating with your guests while also guests respecting your decisions that you make. Because at the end of the day, they don't need to come to your wedding if they don't feel comfortable. This is the couple's decision to make.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought up about the stationers and stuff. That'll be our episode next week. I'm so excited to have a gang of different invitation designers and things to talk about lots of that stuff because obviously besides spending a lot of money on that stuff and wanting it to look good, it is like how do we tactfully what do you send and what do you do? So I'm so glad that'll be stuff we touch on next week too. So that's great. The other thing I wanted to talk about moving into later this year is, and obviously we do not know, but what weddings are going to look like. I know on one of the WIPA calls that I was on, they were talking about having to put families together or assign seating with things. I mean, how do you guys, or are we not even at that point yet to start visualizing that stuff? And maybe we could start with Jen and then go we'll figure out an order from there.
I'll be very honest. I have not even dived into this too much yet for a couple of reasons. One, we still have a ways until our first weddings of the year are occurring, and things are moving so quickly and changing that I'm monitoring things and keeping notes, but not implementing anything yet, just to wait till we know what phase we're in and what's happening. We also have weddings in multiple different counties. So as Lori kind of touched on earlier, there's this added pressure to now be knowledgeable about everything in every county and what's happening. So trying to wrap my brain around that and keep it organized and keep my team up to date on what's happening with their particular weddings in different locations. So yes, we're thinking about all those things. We're thinking about less people per table, spacing out the tables a little bit more, hand sanitizing additional stations or having the couple providing hand sanitizer, talking with the vendors around what protocols are they taking and what safety precautions are they putting into place. But I don't feel like I have this perfect answer grasp on all of that just yet, because I'm still a couple, like 2.5 months out before our first one. So it's on the forefront, but not quite there yet.
It's BreeAnn, and I think I am having those conversations with couples, but also not, when they're comfortable to talk about it too. So, I think just kind of waiting, but until we see actual facts for me to say anything specific. But I think when they have concerns, I'm happy to address those. And I know Rebecca and myself and 2 other wedding planners put together a blog series and planning your wedding during the pandemic. And one of them did include safety measures to consider. And so that I think is things that we've done some research just to say this is what weddings we think might look like and what things to incorporate just to be so that's on their mind as they're mulling over their decision. Because I think people are antsy. So the more information we can give now, but I think it's just keeping them in the loop when we find out information is helpful and being positive, but also realistic.
And for us, we're really working with the venues and just saying, what are you doing, PPE wise in terms of, will you be responsible for, furnishing hand sanitizers? What is your venue going to require in terms of, food and beverage service? And what do you expect of your vendors? So we're taking it from the top and then working our way down. But again, kind of like with and Jen is that, we're kind of leading that conversation in some of our early weddings. And then for our later on couples, we're just kind of if they bring it up, we'll kind of go along with that. But again, you're changing rapidly and with different counties and the different restrictions. It's hard to keep track, but as long as the couples feel comfortable and confident in moving ahead planning wise, and just knowing, again, like what Jen said, is just taking, ample notes. I'm like, okay, Pierce County, we're gonna have to do this. King County, we're gonna have to do that. And Snohomish and things like that. And knowing, we're gonna have to we're gonna have to, change layouts. But I'm not going to get things set in stone because again, things are going to change, as we move forward, further into the summer and into the fall.
So I actually have a little bit different perspective on this since I do own my own venue as well. And we are starting to get calls from parents and things like that. Luckily, we are an outdoor venue with very low touch amount of surfaces. So we have that benefit once we do officially reopen. But we're also, of course, watching what Snohomish County is doing and what they're going to mandate. So I personally have taken on the responsibility of bringing all the Snohomish venue owners together. Thing on my plate, but trying to really get a collective group together to really petition our council members as well as petition the Snohomish County Health Department to say, we want to be proactive about this. We want to know ahead of time what we need to have in place in order for when we reach whatever phase of opening we're at, we can be ready. And that way we're not losing even more weddings, given the fact that we're now having to work, oh gosh, we have to scramble and get all these XYZ in place now, which is now affecting weddings that technically could have happened. But because we didn't have the pieces in place beforehand, now they can't. So I'm taking on that, and they're probably really tired of hearing from me up in Snohomish County, but I feel the more noise we can make and really get weddings on our council members and politicians' radar, the better for all of us. In terms of what I'm directing on my couples on the planning side, it's again comes down to that comfort level. I'm telling them what I'm doing from the planner perspective, and then let's have those deeper conversations of what is your caterer proactively doing, what is your bartender proactively doing, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, in my opinion, and it might be the minority opinion, which is totally fine, all of the guests that choose to come to the wedding are adults, and they will take on whatever responsibility and whatever role that they feel comfortable with. So as long as I'm protecting myself and my team and my vendors and my couple, that is what I'm concerned about. Guests can, obviously will follow whatever guidelines we need to follow but I do trust that guests will take care of themselves and be respectful to the couple, knowing what the rules are in place and knowing that this is affecting their wedding day.
That's great. Yeah, no, it's talking with the like you said, talking with the county. It was on one of the WIPA calls, and that's clearly like my only knowledge outside of any research I do. But one of the planners was saying that in one of they had talked to their governor, and like they hadn't even like thought about weddings, right? That someone had written a letter, and whoever it was, whatever state, and they're like, oh, we hadn't even like thought about that, and it was like Illinois or somewhere over there, and you're like, wow, like that's crazy to think that like. I don't know. It's just, so definitely like making noise.
Yeah, it's our world, but it's not theirs. Yeah. And I think the more we can have a seat at the table of how to safely reopen and the policies and procedures that are in accordance with how events specifically run, the better off we're going to be.
I agree. And I know, Reed, there was kind of a question on, safety, as we're talking about PPE and who's responsible. I think like Rebecca did say, people are going to make their own decision, but I do feel as vendors, we, need to consider for weddings this year. I think it's going to be just health requirements. Catering is absolutely, they will be wearing masks. They will be wearing as much protection as possible. So couples do need to realize that is going to happen. I know majority of wedding vendors as well will be covered wearing masks. I will be wearing a mask at events for this year. Just to protect myself. And if I have an event the next weekend, I need to make sure I'm staying healthy. And so I think all of us, there's a number of people that are going to be getting their temperature taken. Some are going to go get tested before an event. So there's lots of things that people are making their own personal choice. And I think for guests, we cannot require them to wear anything, but they can advise. But I think it's up to each couple how they want to, have their event and host it. And as a vendor, we can choose to be there or not if we feel it's not safe. Obviously, that would be financial, that would financially be a burden. But I think if a vendor isn't comfortable, that's their choice. And they have the right to, have somebody else in their place.
And I think back to the question we were talking about earlier around postponing versus having an intimate wedding now. Being realistic, like everyone is mentioning, about what a wedding right now could look like. Are you okay if everyone is in masks and what that looks like? And I think couples just really need to think about that. I don't I think some are. I just don't know if all of them are thinking that through. And from what I've heard the most, the masks is kind of the biggest thing, that visual, and not wanting the wedding focus to be around the coronavirus and, oh my gosh, we're all here. This is kind of the first thing, we're out in the world again. But the focus should be on the couple and their love and the celebration that we're having. And so how do you balance those? I don't have an answer. I'm just kind of reiterating what everyone's saying, but how do you balance that? And how, as a couple and vendors, do we prepare for that and think about that? So yeah, it's tough. This is definitely something none of us have ever prepared for.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't leave the house a lot. I work from home, and Dorothy goes to the store. And I had to go to the dentist last week. It just happened that the cleanings lined up with whatever, and I had the mask, and I was like walking on the moon. Like, what is going on? Like, where is because, and like you said, people venturing out. It could be one of the first really big times that people have gathered. Right, some of these August weddings will definitely be probably the biggest gathering that a lot of these people have been to in a long time. And so that's a great point to not have the focus be on that. One of the questions we got, and BreeAnn kind of touched on this too, kind of reading my mind, was people are talking about, like waivers, or do guests sign waivers, or do the venue or what, what is that? I mean, have you guys, I don't know, has any thoughts been put into that yet? Because I really don't know. Rebecca, I guess we'll start and then we'll loop around. Sorry, I always said,
That's okay. So I actually know 3 of us on this call have purchased waivers that we will plan on having our couples sign. I feel like because we are kind of at the helm of where couples are at, we are in charge of kind of directing them and advising them without making the decision for them. So if they decide to move forward in this climate, we want to protect ourselves as business owners. This is our only source of livelihood. And if we are putting that on the line, we want to be sure that we're as protected as possible if somebody were to get sick or things like that. So yes, is the short answer to that is I will be having my planning couples for this year sign waivers.
And in what regard, or what I don't know, what good into too many details, but in what context?
The biggest thing is just I don't want to get sued. I mean, let's just cut to the chase right here. If somebody were to be able, however they could, to directly trace back getting sick to that couple's wedding, I don't want it to come back onto myself as, well, our planner told us we could have our wedding because it's safe. Well, no, I didn't. We're all trying to be very, very careful about the verbiage we use, specifically because of that. Like, we cannot make the ultimate decision for our couples. It is totally their choice and their comfort level. And then, like BreeAnn was mentioning earlier, vendor's individual choice to be able to make that decision for them. But in terms of we cannot lose our livelihood over this. We're already hurting enough through it financially. So if somebody were to come back and sue us saying you had us do our wedding, it's just trying to protect us as much as possible from a vendor perspective.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, it's just a chance for clients to look at and go, okay, we are acknowledging there's a pandemic. We're hosting an event. We are the host of this event. That's really what it is, to make sure they just consider and know what they're doing. And not that we're saying that's wrong, but we're just saying that it's their personal choice to host this event.
Jen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Nope. Well said by both.
Or anything else?
No, I think that's perfect. And I think most couples are totally understanding of that too. And, at the end of the day, like what, both Rebecca and BreeAnn said, is that we need to protect our business. And, if God forbid something does happen, we're protected that way.
The other thing that has been talked about a lot, and this was even before, I mean, this was back in March, when we were talking about all like the force majeure and everything, all these things started coming up, wedding insurance and what does that cover? And I know that I put that in the notes. I didn't know if anyone had any specific thoughts on that. Rebecca's raising her hand, so go.
Yeah. So I want to specifically address force majeure because that is something that is getting thrown around a lot from our couples. And I think that it just needs to be put out there, specifically what that means. So force majeure truly means pause in service. It means if there's a hurricane that comes through, you obviously can't have your wedding during that time frame, but you can have it after the venue rebuilds, and you can have it after everybody is working again. Same thing if there's a fire after the venue rebuilds, yada, yada, yada. So it's truly as if the governor or Washington state government is saying, you cannot have your wedding. That is the only time that we are in a true force majeure for an indefinite amount of time, because we know that the time is somewhat finite given other countries, given the history of this, COVID and what that's looking like, and the scientists that are working on getting cures or lessening symptoms or whatever that might look. We do know that this is for a finite amount of time. So therefore, couples do have the opportunity to move their wedding date to an extended date, which again is what most couples are opting to do. But if as a couple you're looking at a vendor contract, well, this is a force majeure. It's not. We are giving you the opportunity to reschedule your date. And then if you take the choice to cancel your wedding because you're just nervous about it or finances or whatever the case might be, we certainly don't hold that against you, but just know that you're going to probably fall under cancellation policies on contracts versus under a force majeure. So,
anyone else?
I think Rebecca answered it. And I know as planners, we've been involved in lots of conversations about contracts with every vendor. And yeah, I think Rebecca kind of covered it.
Yeah, you guys really are on, and this was another question that came in, and just obviously, everybody's handling things differently, with in terms of, are there fees? Are we, what are we doing? And where you guys are seeing a lot of that, I think it would be good to kind of go around the horn just to get, just a little bit of thoughts about that. I had emailed all of my couples back in March, and I said very specifically, every single wedding is going to be handled on a case by case basis. That no one, and like I said, with our friend that postponed, and I told her the same thing. I said, you can't feel bad about postponing your October wedding right now while people are still, everyone has different guests that are coming, and we have couples, that have guests coming from, overseas or whatever, everybody's different. So how are you guys handling that and negotiating that? I know, Lori, we had a client, that I had to go through, stuff with you about, rescheduling fees, and how are you guys handling that? And maybe we'll start with Lori and go down.
Again, it's a case by case basis. I feel like, we've only had to do one rescheduling fee, and that was just because they postponed their wedding really early in the process, not knowing where we're going to be at. And so we had that conversation with the specific planning package they were having, that effectively we were extending the contract for a full extra year, and that what that was going to look like in terms of outside of the scope of what they originally contracted us for. It's arming our clients with all the education. So if they are postponing, is so that they know what steps, and they're not going to be surprised like, oh, now you're having to pay X amount. We didn't know about it.
Yeah, well, we lost a little bit about your answer in there. The internet was cutting out a little bit, but I think we got what you were saying with the case by case. I guess just where you guys are kind of navigating all the vendor policies, right? Obviously, you guys are seeing it across the board. Are you? How are couples handling that with fees or not, or how's that going, Jen?
Sorry, Jen. So I would say it depends if the wedding, let's say, was during May or June. There's a huge difference if you're rescheduling a wedding because ultimately you cannot have it. Then I don't think people are. I mean, across the board, there's not going to be rescheduling fees for the most part. But again, it's case by case because it depends when they're rescheduling. And I think every wedding is different and every vendor is different, but there are fees that are not refundable. And I think our contract says a lot, but also it does say if the weddings are being rescheduled in this calendar year versus 2021, where vendors are going to be losing out on expected income because they are moving those events. And so I think that's when rescheduling fees do apply. And I think it's, every vendor has the right, what they feel is, best for them financially and what's in their contract. But again, it is hard because every wedding is different.
Jen?
Yep, definitely. We've seen on the vendor side of things a little bit of everything. I've seen some vendors that have asked for a portion of the final payment, or let's say they were going to make they've already made a 50% deposit and they're going to pay the final as it gets closer to the wedding. We've seen some want to charge part of that this year on their original wedding date and then have postponed, let's say, that last 25% to a new date if they postpone to next year. We've seen quite a few of the vendors just transfer over that final payment deadline and just write up a new contract or an addendum to the contract with the new date. On the planning side of things, like we talked about earlier on the call, we're in kind of a unique situation because we've done a lot of the work prior to the wedding, and the wedding day is kind of just the wrap up for us in a way. So I know for me personally, I've been evaluating each of our clients who are choosing to either postpone, whether that is to this year or next year. We've been evaluating, how much work has been done to date. Where are we in the planning process, and what are the current states, what phase are we in, and what are the current mandates for that particular wedding versus, like BreeAnn was mentioning, if they're just getting nervous and they could potentially have their wedding in October. And we've also seen a little bit of everything. We've had some couples that have just outright canceled. We've had some completely change their scope and do an intimate wedding this year and more of a cocktail style wedding reception next year. And then we've seen the full postponements till next year. So it's too hard to say, one option for everybody, because just like every wedding is unique, every situation that we're encountering is really unique.
Rebecca, any other thoughts on that?
I do. Yeah, I agree completely with all the ladies of having it unique to each vendor and each couple directly what their priority is and kind of what they're wanting to do. For me personally, I have charged my reschedule fee for a couple to a Saturday on my peak summer months. So that's going to be July through September. Because obviously that's our only ability, well, not only ability to make money, but that's the peak of our ability to make money. And we'll be living, if we're lucky, 2 years off of 1 year's salary. So it's a lot for us to take on financially to be able, we want to accommodate, but it is very significant financially. For us all to be able to still live and keep our businesses afloat. In addition to that, the couples that are raising wedding, I really, really want to make sure that they're understanding that there's options. You don't need to cut your vendors completely. And keep in mind, like, again, this is your vendor's only livelihood. So if you're downsizing wedding and now all of a sudden the scope of florals is less, the scope of catering is less, and you're less than retainer, or you're choosing to cancel altogether and that vendor saying, I need to keep my non-refundable retainer because that's contractually what you agreed to, don't think of it as a loss of it in a different way. It doesn't have to be needed to a wedding. It can be allocated to, if you want to send your mom flowers for the next 3 months, go for it. If you want to have already catered by your caterer, absolutely. That's allowing that vendor to be able to retain that money that has been paid to them and that they are relying on for their income. And it's also getting you the benefit of being able to still utilize their services without feeling like it's lost money.
Yeah, the tough thing with the downsizing is, where you contract for this big thing, and then we even had one. They were getting married in July and they're moving, but they were like, well, if we get married, if we do a little ceremony this July, can we like split the hours with you? And then next year, I'm like, okay, well now I'm like, that's like 2 days, that we're reserving, and we ultimately, they rescheduled us to next year. Rebecca, and I wanted to talk on this too, is about, like I've been charging fees, rescheduling, to prime dates next year. It sounds like that's the same. Are you guys, how are you guys navigating that with your couples? This is a big one I wanted to talk about with, utilizing, not May to August or whatever, right? Like utilizing Fridays or Wednesdays or off season, like, because, so many of ours have been, okay, well, we were 8-8 this year and we want to be 8-7 next year. And you're like, wow, okay. Like you said, that's, 2 years off of this. So how are you guys, and Lori, maybe we'll start with you. Or how are you guys, are you trying to talk with couples about those different options?
Well, for us, I have an associate planner, Lisa, and we only do one wedding per weekend. It's just more sanity for me. Obviously, that may change next year. But we do have couples that are moving this year that have postponed, have picked a Monday, a Thursday, and Friday. So, and luckily we didn't have anything that weekend anyway, or we were able to have Lisa do the wedding, or if it was Lisa's client that I could do it. So we're being very flexible that way. But again, communicating with our clients is
Jen?
Yeah, I wish I had been a little more strict from the beginning about this. I think it was like, oh, we'll accommodate anything. We want to work with you. And then as time went on, it was like, oh, wait a second. Now all my prime Saturdays have been booked with not net new clients, with just 2021. So doing a little bit of backtracking with that. But we got really lucky where, as Lori was mentioning, a lot of our clients as well are postponing to Sundays or Thursdays. And so while we also typically take one wedding a weekend, I can definitely see myself working a Thursday wedding and a Saturday wedding. That feels a lot more doable than back to back, and not being able to be at, two ceremony rehearsals and things like that. So that's been really helpful. And then I have a team as well. There's 2 other associate planners on my team. So I have been so thankful to have a team, because some of the dates that guests have postponed to, one of my associates is not available, so I can take it on, and vice versa. And I've just been in communication with them on, like, I know we normally go over the schedule for next year a little bit later in the season, but we're doing it sooner given everything, and just trying to kind of be accommodating. But there are already, I know of 3 specific weekends in my head for next year that we're already completely booked. The whole team is. So it stinks. That's not what I would choose with not having those filled with all brand new clients. But I also understand that none of us saw this coming. Our clients didn't ask for this. We didn't ask for this. So just trying to kind of be a little more tactful moving forward and encouraging all date options, as we've kind of talked about before today.
BreeAnn?
I would say, I think it's, just advising them. I think fees make a difference too. So letting people know if they're choosing more off season, vendors are more flexible in not charging those rescheduling fees. Whereas if it's a prime date, there is that rescheduling fee. But I also look at it as the perspective of them. I mean, none of us expected this. Our clients, everyone, it's not our choice. But from their perspective, a majority of my clients are from out of state. And so with traveling in, it's been difficult where, weekends are going to be, what's best for them. But also, I think giving them options that if somebody is willing to travel in for the weekend, they could miss like a Monday of work or, something like that. But I think we just need to be flexible and work with clients, because it's an emotional time for them. And I think if we're saying you can only book, midweek or off peak, then it's just going to cause a bit more tension for another year of planning. So I think it's just all around being open and giving the reality of where they are, if it's going to be, off season or peak season.
Rebecca?
Yeah, truly, again, agreement with all the other ladies. But for me in particular, again, the only time I'm actually sticking to my reschedule fee is if a peak Saturday is chosen. Anything else, free of charge, no problem. I'm happy to reschedule you. One of the things that I've been noticing, and I'm not sure if the other ladies can speak to this or not, but a lot of vendors actually don't have a reschedule in their contract. I did, so I am protected contractually to have that already existing. The expectation was already set upon signature from the get-go. But it's been interesting to see those that are trying to be like, well, I would really love to have a reschedule fee, because this is taking, of course, a date is now being unable to be booked. But legally and contractually, there was nothing in place beforehand. So it's kind of being caught in the middle a little bit as a planner, because you of course want to advocate for your couple, but you also completely understand the vendor side and for vendor perspective of, the financial aspect of now giving up 2 dates out of inventory. So it's been interesting to kind of navigate that line as well and be like, and I think a lot of the other vendor teams, when I'm trying to move entire teams over, I've gotten a lot of feedback of like, well, what are all the other vendors doing? And so it's I think that herd mentality. Yeah, the herd mentality, right? Of like, well, if no one else is charging, I don't want to charge. And then I have been very candid and said, I had it in my contract pre-COVID, so I am charging. But if you didn't have that, then I cannot hold the client's feet to the fire and say you have to pay for that. So it's been interesting to navigate that. Go ahead, Jen.
Yes. Any vendors listening, if you could please take this time to make sure you have reviewed your contracts, make sure the date is clear at the top of when the event is occurring, that the services are really clear. I can't tell you how much time I spend combing through different vendor contracts, trying to find the information that I need for my clients, and it's not there. Or like Rebecca mentioned, their cancellation policy is extremely weak and does not have a lot in there. I mean, you are only doing yourself a disservice by not having that updated. And it doesn't mean it needs to be ironclad and 12 pages long or anything like that. I mean, we can still be human beings and reasonable, but man, it has been shocking to see the contracts that are coming through, and then the pushback that some vendors have been trying to give when it's like you don't have anything to stand on when your contract is full of holes like this.
Well, and I think for, at least for our team, is, the one positive that's come out of this is we've really kind of looked at our contract and figured out, okay, if this does happen again, protected, how our couples are protected. And that's even for couples that are postponing their weddings. Some vendors say, oh, we're not doing any contract addendums, or we're not doing any new contracts. So for me, that makes me a little nervous when there's not something new. Yes. So it's one of those things where, I tell my clients, like, in my professional opinion, if they don't want to do a new contract, that's fine, but at least do a contract addendum that shows what you've already paid, what protects you. Because I had one that said, oh yeah, but the new contract they sent them didn't even show that they had to pay a new deposit. Like, no, it's okay. You've already got it. Well, no, you need to update exactly what they paid, because I don't want them coming back to, oh, now they have to pay, another deposit. And so it's just, that's something, all vendors who take a look at.
Yeah, my favorite interaction we had, the photographer had posted on Facebook and said, something came up about deposit or rescheduling fees and stuff, and she was like, "Well, how do you guys do that? How do you enforce that?" And I said, "Well, because it was in the contract. That's not something that I've seen quite a few funny, like I think I'm going to charge him a 50% additional retainer or whatever. You're like, oh, okay, like, oh, well, let me know how that's going to go. Like, that sounds, it is interesting hearing, like you said, just the contracts and stuff that haven't been in place.
I think what I am seeing, I was just going to chime in, nobody tapped on, is people are updating. Maybe they do or they don't have a reschedule fee, but they're I think it's a lot of hair and makeup. It's 2021 rates that they're requiring once you move to bump up to that. So they might not be doing a reschedule fee, but they're saying it needs to be 2021 rates. But I agree. I think contracts are really what ultimately we all have to look to, and it's making sure every vendor contract says all the details. And I think as planners, I think that's why ours are so long, because we have seen so many contracts over the years. They're like, oh, we're adding that. Oh, our contract needs to be changed. So I think as a planner, we have an extraordinarily long contract, whereas others are 1 page or half a page, which scares the bejesus out of me.
I was laughing when Jen said, you don't want a 12-page contract. And I'm like, well, my contract is 12 pages. I was like, well,
I think
everyone but us.
And I just got, yeah.
No, I always laugh when ours is, it's gotten longer over the years. I always laugh when I send like the DocuSign and they're like, 10:01, whoever viewed it, 10:03, they signed it. And I'm like, wow, that was really fast.
I mean, that's the flip side of this too, is clients are not reading through maybe as much as they should, and then surprised later on when these mystery feasts pop up that were actually never mysterious to begin with. So
this has been great. You guys have been so wonderful with all your time. I don't want to hold you all day. I'm sure we could talk for many, many hours on this. Is there anything else? We got a lot of questions. I think we touched on a lot of topics. Anything else in particular that you thought that maybe I was a dummy and didn't ask about so far? No.
I did everything.
We think we killed it.
one quick thing.
Yeah, Jen, absolutely.
I think for those vendors that are the first to go through with weddings this year, I would just love for vendors to share more about that experience, how it was. I think since we are all trying to kind of figure this out together and see what's working, what's not, let's leverage each other. More brain power, the better. And I would just hope to see a lot of people sharing with the community around those experiences and how it goes. Because I think I can speak for all of us. We are so excited for the weddings that are going to happen this year and celebrating, and it'll be fun to also cheer on and encourage the vendors that do get to participate in some of those celebrations this year.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think if anything, and I've talked about this on our other podcast too, I think if nothing else from this, we have gotten a lot better at communicating with our clients, right? And communicating with each other, and not that there's been horrible things that have come across from all of this, but if there's one benefit, I do think it's that, right? And I think I've always made the joke that, I think we are in a really unique industry where I don't think you would, text or call your plumber at 11 o'clock at night asking, a question about whatever. But I do think, and I'm sure you guys have all had calls and emails and texts at all hours of the day. And that just proves how different of a relationship that we have with our clients. And I do think that that's really cool to see. So,
yeah.
And I would,
go ahead, Rebecca. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I would piggyback onto what Jen said. Luckily, within Seattle, we are a very, very collaborative community. We don't have a lot of cat fights. We don't have a lot of competition with each other. We are very community based. So I think as a vendor team, that really helps. But couple on the client side, you need to know, we genuinely care about you. We would not be in this job if we didn't. We're certainly not in it for the money. We're in it because we really care about being a part of your celebration and a part of your day. So on the flip side, I would ask that as we're advocating for you and as to all of our council members and talking to the health departments, please help us to do the same, because you're going to be a louder voice in some ways than we are. Yes, it's our livelihood, so that's what they're seeing from our perspective. But from a client perspective, I think it's imperative that they hear from you in the 3 big counties, especially, that we want to have our wedding. We are having to postpone. We're having to look at everybody's travel plans. We're having to look at the different hotels. They need to hear from you just as badly as they need to hear from us.
Yeah, and I think Rebecca kind of took some of what not in a bad way, but said what I was going to say. But I know a lot of this topic and what our discussion was more heavy, but I think ultimately, none of us, no vendor likes to look at our fine tooth with, the contracts and really go over them. And that's all we're talking about. I think these last few months is all the nitty gritty. And I like details and everything, but I like the fun details. We're talking about, your guest book and why we have this meaningful guest book. So ultimately, that's what we'd all rather be talking about. Our job, we really do not want to be doing all the contracts. We want to be doing the fun thing. So I think that's what of this topic and the last few months have been really hard for everyone. But we just want, the light at the end of the tunnel and to talk about all the happy things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been it's definitely been an interesting time, and this whole the waiting game, and like you said, especially now where we're getting into the time where we would be having a lot of weddings, I think is probably the most challenging. March is a pretty easy month for best made videos, and so I think as we get into May and I mean it's like June now, it's crazy. So it's interesting. Well, good. Well, thank you guys so much again for coming on this kind of inaugural episode of our new podcast, Best Made Weddings. It really means a lot that I asked all of you guys, and everyone said yes, and you were all my first choices, and so that means a lot that everyone came on and to share some knowledge, and hopefully we can continue to do this, and get to lots of topics, hopefully moving into more positive things kind of in the future as we go. But right now, we need to touch on things that are, front of mind, and that's what it is. If you have a question, for an upcoming episode, you can go to bestmadevideos.com/survey, and I have a nice, you can go by vendor type and ask questions, and hopefully we can start getting some more topics. But we do have 5 or 6 episodes kind of lined up now with guests talking about venues and live streaming and, DJs and what is that going to look like? So lots of, I think, good topics. I'm going to link everyone's, websites and things, all that information and shout outs. Is there anything else before I let you guys go?
Thank you for so much to come and share.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, you guys. And hopefully everyone stays safe. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.